Mountains don't care about your dreams. They stand silent, towering, indifferent, wrapped in beauty so breathtaking it pulls you closer, whispering promises of glory, of conquest, of becoming something more than ordinary. But beneath that majesty lies a truth climbers learn too late. These peaks are not stages for triumph. They're graveyards dressed in ice and stone. For every flag planted at a summit, there's a body frozen in the snow. For every story of victory, a darker tale of ambition meeting annihilation. These are the most horrific tales of nearly 60 souls who climbed toward heaven and found something else entirely. It was June 8, 1924, on Mount Everest, 28,000 feet above sea level. Two figures moved slowly against an endless ski. One older, shaped by 3 previous attempts on this towering beast. The other is young and brilliant, carrying experimental oxygen gear that might finally give them the advantage no one else had. George Lee Mallory was 37 years old, a teacher, a husband, a father of 3. He had survived the trenches of World War I only to become consumed by a different kind of battle. A battle against rock, ice, and the thin, killing air of the world's highest peak. When asked why he kept risking everything to return to Everest, he answered with a line that would echo through history. Because it's there. But it wasn't only that he was haunted. Twice he had been turned back by storms, exhaustion, and the mountain's refusal to yield. This third attempt felt different. It felt final. He told his wife, Ruth, that one way or another, this would be his last climb. And he made her a promise. He would leave her photograph at the summit, proof that he made it. Proof that human will could bend the mountain at last. His partner was Sandy Irvine. Only 22, an Oxford rowing champion, a mechanical genius from a wealthy Liverpool family. He had transformed the oxygen equipment climbers depended on at altitude. Strong, gifted, but untested in Everest's upper reaches, Mallory chose him anyway. He believed youth and innovation might succeed, where experience had always failed. They first met on the SS California while sailing toward India and the base of Everest. An unlikely friendship began over ship dinners and quiet talks about ambition. By the time they reached Camp 6, at 26,800 feet, they were more than partners. They were brothers, preparing for the final push. The night was clear. The stars burned above them like sparks against black glass. Below, their teammate Noel Odell watched from Camp 4, waiting for dawn, waiting for the signal flares that would tell the world if history had been made. At first light, Mallory and Irvine began to climb 25 pounds of gear each. Primitive oxygen tanks, ice axes, a camera, and Ruth's photograph, tucked carefully in Mallory's jacket. At 12:50 in the afternoon, through a break in the swirling clouds, Odell lifted his binoculars. He saw them, 2 tiny black dots moving along the northeast ridge, just below the second step, a near vertical wall of rock 850 feet from the summit. One figure seemed to be helping the other climb, then the mist closed in again and hid them from sight. They were swallowed by cloud. Odell waited, hopeful. Maybe they had made it. Maybe right then they were standing on top of the world. But afternoon faded into evening. The sun melted behind the Himalayas. No one returned. He climbed higher the next morning, calling their names into the wind. Nothing answered except the mountain's empty roar. They had vanished completely. As if Everest had decided to keep them. For 75 years, the silence held. Then, in 1999, an American expedition found George Mallory's body at 26,760 feet, bleached by sun and wind, frozen in a posture that told its own tragic story. Arms extended, fingers clawed into the slope, as if he tried to arrest a fall that could not be stopped. His right leg shattered, ribs broken, rope marks around his waist torn and frayed, hinting that he and Irvine were still roped together when it all went wrong. But Ruth's photograph was gone, either lost in the fall or placed at the summit just as he promised. Sandy Irvine has never been found, nor has the camera that could settle the question that has lingered for nearly a century. Did they make it first? Did they stand on the summit 29 years before Edmund Hillary? Did they reach the top, only to die on the way down? The mountain will not say. What we know is this. 2 men walked into the clouds that day, chasing immortality. Only one came back, frozen and silent, holding secrets no one will ever fully know. Glory and death, it turns out, can look exactly the same from 850 feet away. Here's the thing about Everest. By 1996, it wasn't exploration anymore. It was business, big business. Companies were charging $65,000 per person to guide you to the summit. $65,000. And if you had the money and were reasonably fit, they'd get you to the top. Or so they promised. That day, 34 climbers from 4 different expeditions were all heading for the summit at the same time. 34 people on the same mountain on the same day. 2 companies dominated the scene. Rob Hall's Adventure Consultants and Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness. Rob Hall was a legend, 39 years old, had summited Everest 5 times, never lost a client. Not once. Scott Fisher was the charismatic American, 40, with movie star looks and that infectious confidence that made you believe nothing could go wrong. They were friends, competitors, and both absolutely certain this would be another successful season. Their clients, a mix of dreamers paying their life savings for this. Journalist John Krakauer was there writing about commercialized Everest for Outside magazine. Yasuko Namba, a 47-year-old Japanese businesswoman chasing her 7th summit. Doug Hansen, a postal worker who'd failed the previous year and came back for redemption. Beck Weathers, a Texas pathologist. Everyday people buying a shot at the top of the world. Now, there was one rule. One sacred, non-negotiable rule that kept people alive. Turn around by 2 p.m., no matter how close you are to the summit. Doesn't matter if you can see the top. Doesn't matter if you're 50 feet away. 2 p.m., you turn around. Because the descent is when people die. You're exhausted. It gets dark. Your oxygen runs out. Anyone still climbing after 2 p.m.? They weren't coming back. They left at midnight, headlamps bobbing up the mountain in a single-file line. The weather was perfect, clear, calm, like the mountain was giving them a gift. But here's what nobody anticipated. Too many damn people. A bottleneck formed at the Hillary Step, that near-vertical 40-foot cliff face just below the summit. Someone forgot to fix the ropes beforehand, so climbers just waited. Burning oxygen, burning time, burning the daylight they desperately need later. By the time people started reaching the summit, it was past 2 p.m. Some as late as 3:45 p.m. Rob Hall was still climbing, helping Doug Hansen, that postal worker, reach the summit he'd been denied the year before. Scott Fisher was moving slow, strangely exhausted. Guide Andy Harris seemed confused, disoriented, and the weather window was closing. At 3 p.m., everything changed. Not gradually, instantly, like someone flipped a switch and turned day into hell. Winds hit 100 miles per hour, whiteout so complete you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. Temperature plummeting past -40, the fixed ropes buried under fresh snow, impossible to find. The route down, gone, vanished. Rob Hall was trapped at the south summit with Doug Hansen, both out of oxygen, too weak to move. Scott Fisher collapsed near the balcony, 1,000 feet below the summit. Just stopped, couldn't go on. Multiple climbers wandered blind in circles, some walking 200 yards from camp, but unable to find it in the whiteout. Beck Weathers was left for dead. Twice. He looked so frozen, so gone, that rescuers marked him as deceased and moved on. By morning, 8 people were dead. Doug Hansen, Andy Harris, Scott Fisher, Yasuko Namba, 3 others from different teams. Rob Hall, that legend who'd never lost a client, lived through the night at 28,700 feet. The highest anyone has ever survived in the open. He made a satellite call to his pregnant wife back in New Zealand. "Hi, my sweetheart. I hope you're tucked up in a nice warm bed. How are you doing?" She begged him to try to descend, to keep fighting. "Don't worry about me," he said. His last words, "Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much." He died hours later, still sitting upright, looking down at the world below. But here's where it gets impossible to believe. Beck Weathers, the guy they left for dead, hands frozen solid, face destroyed by frostbite, opened his eyes, stood up, and walked back into camp like a man rising from the grave. He survived, lost both hands, his nose, parts of his face, but survived. The 1996 disaster changed Everest forever. John Krakauer's book Into Thin Air exposed the ugly truth that commercialization had turned the mountain into a death trap, that ego and money were pushing people beyond their limits. 8 people died because everyone ignored the 2 p.m. rule, because there were too many people on one mountain, because nobody wanted to turn around when the summit was right there. Sometimes being that close is what kills you. Most people have never heard of Lenin Peak. It's not Everest. It's not even in the top 10 highest mountains. At 23,406 feet, it's what climbers call a trekking summit, meaning you don't need to be some elite mountaineer to climb it. Moderately experienced, decent fitness, you could do it. And that's exactly why it was so popular, why it was so crowded. Camp 2, they called it, the frying pan, sat at 17,400 feet in this natural bowl below the summit pyramid. Perfect spot, really. Sheltered, flat, room for dozens of tents. On the evening of July 13th, it was home to 45 climbers from all over the world. Russians from the Leningrad Mountaineering Club, Czechs, Israelis, Swiss, Germans, an international village up there, people sharing meals, telling stories, making summit plans for the next day. Above them, and nobody really thought about this, was a massive serac, a tower of glacial ice just hanging there on the slope. It had been there for years. Forever, probably. Nobody worried about it. Here's what happened next. At 8:36 p.m., 216 kilometers away in Afghanistan, a 6.4 magnitude earthquake hit deep underground. Most people didn't even feel it. Down at base camp, below Lenin Peak, it registered as a mild tremor, barely noticeable. The kind of thing you might not even mention. But at 17,400 feet, where that serac was hanging in perfect equilibrium, that tremor was enough. 9:30 p.m. climbers were settling in for the night. Some reading, some writing in journals. Boiling water for tea, the usual camp routine. Safe, comfortable, tired but happy. Then the mountain made a sound. You know that sound, like thunder, but wrong. Deeper, coming from everywhere at once. The serac collapsed. Just let go. Millions of pounds of ice breaking apart, accelerating, triggering an avalanche that roared straight down at Camp 2. No warning, no time to run, no time to even understand what was happening. The wave of ice and snow hit at over 60 miles per hour. 43 tents buried in seconds, the snow compacted on impact, not soft powder, but dense as concrete. So hard you couldn't dig through it with your bare hands. 43 people, gone, just like that. The only 2 who survived on that day were Alexei Koren and Miroslav Brosman, because their tents were right at the edge of the avalanche zone. They clawed their way out, injured, disoriented, alone in the darkness, and realized everyone else was buried. They descended through crevasse fields in pitch black. How they made it down alive is a miracle in itself. When rescue teams arrived, they could barely recover anyone. The snow was too compressed, too deep. One body was retrieved initially. The rest stayed frozen in the mountain. It took until 2004 for the glacier to start melting enough to reveal remains. By 2011, more bodies had emerged, finally returned to families after 21 years. 43 people. The deadliest single mountaineering disaster in history, caused by an earthquake they never even felt. Hundreds of kilometers away. These weren't people making stupid decisions. They weren't ignoring warnings or pushing too far. They were sleeping in their tents, drinking tea, writing postcards home, doing everything right, and the mountain killed them anyway. Wrong place, wrong time. An earthquake on a different continent shifted ice just enough to end 43 lives in under a minute. The mountain didn't care who you were, how experienced, how prepared, how innocent. It just buried you and moved on. Look, these aren't massive mountains. The highest peak? No, it's just barely 4,000 feet. You could climb that in a day. People take their dogs up there on weekends. But here's what kills you in the Cairngorms if you happen to be unlucky. It's not the height. It's that the plateau is completely flat and featureless. No landmarks, no shelter. And when the weather turns, it turns fast. Arctic storms slam in with zero warning. And suddenly you're in a whiteout where you can't see 5 feet in front of your face. People have died 200 yards from safety because they literally couldn't find their way back. But on this fateful day, 6 teenagers from Edinburgh had no idea about any of this. They were 15 and 16 years old. Just kids. Carol Bertram, Diane Dudgeon, Shelley Henderson, Billy Hurd, Raymond Leslie, Carol Miller. They'd joined their school's climbing club, Ainsley Park, thinking it'd be fun weekend trips, maybe some camping, learning to use a compass. This particular trip was supposed to be a navigation exercise. Walk across the plateau, learn some skills, be back for hot chocolate by evening. Their parents signed the permission slips, thinking their kids were going on a supervised hike. A walk in the hills, safe, educational. Nobody told them their children would be crossing one of Britain's most dangerous plateaus in near-winter conditions. The leaders were young too. Ben Beatty, 23, was experienced and knew what he was doing, but the group split up. Ben took the stronger climbers on the main route. His girlfriend, Catherine Davidson, 21, took the rest, 6 teenagers, plus 18-year-old trainee Sheila Sunderland. Catherine had limited winter mountain experience, and she was about to be responsible for 7 lives on an exposed plateau as a storm rolled in. They started late, took the ski lift up around noon. The plan was simple: navigate to Ben Macdui, then down before dark. But the weather started changing. Wind picking up, snow falling harder, visibility dropping. This made Catherine call it. Skip the summit, follow the stream down instead, get off the mountain as soon as possible. She was trying to keep them safe, doing what she thought was right. But the stream disappeared under the snow, and now they were lost. By 5 p.m., they couldn't see anything. Wind screaming at 60 miles per hour, driving ice into their faces. Temperature way below freezing. And it was getting dark. Catherine made the only decision she could. Dig a snow hole, get everyone inside. Fire the distress flares, wait for rescue. They huddled together in that hole. Fired flares that disappeared into the blizzard. Shouted for help that nobody could hear over the wind. Then the snow started burying them, 4 feet deep overnight. Heavy, wet, crushing down on the shelter. They couldn't move, could barely breathe. The teenagers sang songs, trying to stay awake, trying to stay warm, fighting the cold creeping into their bodies. One by one, the voices stopped. Monday morning, Catherine crawled out on frozen legs, barely conscious. She collapsed in the snow, unable to stand, and whispered where the others were. Rescuers started digging. 5 teenagers were already dead. Sheila, dead. Frozen together, only Raymond Leslie survived. The smallest kid in the group. Somehow his body held on. They pulled him out with a core temperature so low he should have been dead, but he lived, recovered completely. The only one who made it home. The investigation found that parents weren't given adequate information about the real dangers their children would face. Think about that if you're a parent. When your kid brings home a permission slip for a school trip, are you asking the right questions? Are they telling you everything? After this tragedy, reforms were promised. Safety protocols improved, but nobody was blamed. Just reforms. Promises to do better next time. 6 kids went on a school trip. Only 1 came back. Catherine Davidson had to live with that for the rest of her life. Thanks for watching. See you in next video.